Then two news and views with myself, Salalo Makwideri. And parents, this one is going to hit a bit close to home. Imagine getting an unexpected bill from your child's school, and it's not for extra sports or music classes, but to pay off a massive VAT liability. That's the warning that's coming from South Africa's independent schools right now. There's a proposed change to VAT rules, which could see private schools across South Africa deregistered from the VAT system. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means no more VAT refunds on expenses like classrooms, transport, security, catering, and suddenly millions of rands in costs are shifted directly into parents in the form of school fees. Schools are warning that they could be forced to hike fees, cut back on scholarships, and even stall development projects. There's some schools that are also calculating liabilities running into hundreds of millions. And to help us understand what this really means for parents and whether this could become a crisis for the independent education sector, I'm now joined by Ebrahim Ansur, former executive headmaster of Orient Islamic School. He's the Secretary General of the National Alliance of Independent Schools Association and an executive member of the Association of Muslim Schools of South Africa. Ibrahim, assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah so much for joining us. Welcome to Salam Media, and looking forward to talk to you about this very, very important issue.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah Salelo. I hope I have the pronunciation correct.
No, got it. Got it. Yes.
Excellent.
I think let's jump right into it. We can maybe just kickstart with the basics. I think a lot of parents at this point want to know what exactly is this proposed VAT change, and why our private schools are being so hard hit and affected by it the most.
Listen, firstly, let me start with the disclaimer. I am no tax expert. However, we were notified about this proposed change some months ago, and we have 9 associations in NAISA, which is the National Alliance of Independent Schools Associations, and some associations obviously are affected much worse than others. The independent school sector in our country in the recent times has actually grown in numbers, where at one stage we were just about 5% of the total number of schools. Now we are 10%. There are about 25,000 schools in the country, and we have about 2,500 independent schools. Now, those schools, especially those schools that are perhaps better resourced, better funded, have for many years been registered as VAT providers, which means that clearly school fees and any other costs related to education are exempt from VAT, but other services that these schools provide, for example, they may have shops at their schools, they sell uniforms, they hire out their premises, and they engage in a whole host of activities which are designed to generate funds for the school, apart from the basic educational service that they provide. Now, those schools were then in the past, or currently, are eligible to claim VAT on those services that they provide. Now, according to the law, if you generate income of more than R1 million per year, then you are liable to be registered for VAT. You have to register for VAT. Now, many of our schools are not VAT registered, but those that are, and there are a significant number, those schools are going to be directly impacted by these new amendments to the VAT laws. What has happened is that each of our associations has, in fact, submitted or have been asked to submit their objections to this tax amendment. And in particular, ISASA, which is the largest of our associations, and to whom the majority of the better resourced and historically advantaged schools in our country belong, they have in fact engaged the services of tax consultants and have made a lengthy submission. Now, the reality is that while uh, it's not very clear at the moment, but it is quite possible that these schools would be asked to pay back VAT for several years. And as you rightly point out, that could go into the millions of rands. And the schools obviously would have to look at increasing their fees or charging their parents a special levy to cover up for the shortfall. I'm hoping that sanity will prevail and that the submissions that have been made will in fact be taken into account, and the government will have a rethink about changing the tax laws, because it certainly impact on parents who will have to pay the additional fees. I just want to add, there seems to be an assault on the independent school sector regarding the imposition of, for example, I'll give you some of the challenges that the independent school sector faces just to survive. Now, at least 50 to 60% of our schools are subsidized by the state, which means they charge fees that are much less than what the state uh, charges or what the state expends on a learner in a state school. Now, for the last 10 or 15 years, there has been a gradual reduction in the subsidies paid to independent schools. In some provinces, the subsidies are around 30% of what they should be getting. In other words, I mean, if the school was in terms of we have a policy in place, a national policy for payment of subsidies, and if they were supposed to be getting 100 Rand, for example, they get 30 Rand as a subsidy because the budget in that province does not allow for the full subsidy to be paid. So that's one example. And most of our provinces have been affected. So independent schools obviously again will have to increase fees to cover up for the reduction in subsidies. Another very important factor is property rates. Previously, schools were regarded as public benefit organizations and they were charged preferential property rates. But recently, and in Johannesburg, you would have come across this, they have the municipality, the Johannesburg Metro, has decided to impose commercial rates on school properties. And I know in Pietermaritzburg, I just received a letter last week from a school where their rates are 57,000 Rand per month. And this is a small school. If you take the Johannesburg CBD and in some of the areas like Sandton and so on, the property rates are very high, and independent schools have been asked to pay business rates on their school properties. Now, this has been challenged in court, and at the moment we have a moratorium. The Johannesburg municipality has been asked to hold back on these property rates, but the Joburg Metro has in fact taken this on appeal. That's one example. I mean, two examples I've given you. In addition to the VAT, the second issue is the reduction of subsidies. The third issue is property rates. And you'll be very interested to know that other organizations are also climbing on the bandwagon. For example, you have an organization called SAMRO, which is a South African music rights organization. And they have, for the last 7 or 8 years, been asking us to pay a levy on music that is used by schools. And not only that, but even the South African Film Producers Association has come on and said that if you use any film or video, etc., you must pay some kind of royalty to our organization. So just to emphasize that, the independent school sector is under a great deal of financial strain. And let's hope this VAT registration issue, of course, let's hope that this does not come to pass. But the reality is that the school fees are going to increase if it happens.
Very, very concerning. And I want to stick on that theme because I'm sure there's a lot of parents that are listening right now. And I think they want to know, in the most simplest of terms, as they plan for the next year, how quickly could fees increase if this goes through? Are we talking, a small adjustment or, massive, massive hikes that they need to prepare for?
No, I would think it would vary from school to school. I don't think that the independent school sector will take this lying down. Obviously, there's going to be massive opposition to it. To give you an example, I mean, if you take the budget on education in the country, it is 332 billion rand, which is the largest budget allocation for any service that the state provides. And 10% of that is 32 billion rand. Now, even if half our independent school children have to leave the independent school sector and move to the state, it's going to cost the state up to 16 to 20 billion rand per annum more to educate those children. So, in terms of quantum, I'm sure it's going to vary from school to school. I don't see this being implemented in January of 2026 because I'm certain that there are going to be lots of opposition. There's going to be lots of opposition to this move, but certainly there is going to be some form of increase. I hope it's not very drastic.
I want to, focus, I think, on a point that you've already touched on, just lightly. There's often, an assumption here in South Africa that independent schools are only for, a very wealthy minority. Can you maybe just paint a picture of the reality on the ground, the kind of schools and families that would be affected by this? It's not just, only the rich or, the upper middle class that could easily afford some of these adjustments, but there are, a lot of families who are not that privileged but still have their kids in private schools because of the state of government schools at the current moment.
Yeah, listen, there is this misconception, and I must tell you that we've had to fight very hard to correct that misconception and the perception, even in government circles, that independent schools are wealthy. The reality is that, as I mentioned earlier, at least 60% of the independent schools in our country are subsidized. And they can be subsidized only if their fees are at a level which is much lower than what is charged by what it costs the state to educate a child. So, in terms of demographics, 60% or more of our children in independent schools are from the disadvantaged Black communities. And in addition to, the fact that many of the schools charge very low fees, in some cases no fees at all. We have community organizations that run schools free. There aren't too many, but there are. I know in KZN, for example, there are at least 10 or 15 schools where children are educated absolutely free and given the quality independent education within the ethos that that the parents choose. So there is a significant number of parents. And over and above that, I think you will know that even in the past, in the bad old days of apartheid, Black parents in particular sacrificed a great deal to make sure that the children receive a quality education, and that continues. So even if the man in the street, the working parent, is actually making huge sacrifices to make sure that their children are educated in an environment where they will get quality education within a certain ethos. So it's going to impact everybody. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about the very wealthy schools. Where the school fees, the highest is close to 500,000 rand per year, including boarding. That's the cost of educating a child in one of our top independent schools. But school fees and on average are less than 20,000 rand per year for the schools that service the underprivileged. And even those parents do pay a certain amount, but they will also be expected to pay a little more if all these tax laws and the reduction in subsidies in particular kick in.
No, most definitely. And that's something that I can tell you that personally I know of, having working class parents put you into a private school system. It's not everyone is rich. I can guarantee people that. But finally, just for our listeners, what's your message, to parents right now who are listening this morning, who are already stretched by school fees, and are probably being concerned about the announcement that was just made. Any words of, I don't know, trying to calm them down? What should they be preparing for, if anything, as 2026 looms closer?
Well, I think, it's a right for every citizen to object. And if there's any movement, any petition, etc., they should actually join and add their voice to the objections to this new system where education is going to become unaffordable to many people. So I think that's the first point. Try to make every effort to object to this new impositions. And then obviously, the community as a whole has to rally together to see what can we do to support our schools. I mean, the fact is that the schools play a huge role in providing quality education. You only have to look at the quality of the matric passes and where those high-flying children come from and where the 100% pass rates come from. You'll notice that there's a lot of effort put into independent schooling. And I think everything has to be done to make sure that as many of our children as possible can be educated in that environment. And of course, an appeal again, we have some benefactors and community organizations that plow millions of rands into subsidizing independent schools, providing zakat and other forms of financial assistance. So we just have to, firstly, as I said, appeal to the community at large to add their voice to the objections. Secondly, to make sure that they galvanize support within the communities to make sure that the schools can continue operating at the level that they do.
Most definitely, and also continue, giving scholarships, to children that are from underprivileged families. Ibrahim, we're going to be here for now. We have run out of time, unfortunately, but we'll definitely be keeping in touch with you as the story continues to progress and the updates on the matter.
Jazakallah, thank you very much for having me.
I mean, there you go. That is Ebrahim Ansur, former executive headmaster of Orient Islamic School, and now Secretary General of the National Alliance of Independent Schools Associations. Yeah, I think if you're a parent, this is definitely a story to keep a close eye on, because if these VAT changes go ahead and they continue, it won't just affect the elite schools. It could hit the very institutions that are providing access and scholarships for thousands and thousands of children who come from underprivileged backgrounds, but they're so brilliant academically that they were given opportunities to access, private school education, which I think at this point we can all agree that it's slightly better than public school education. And what's concerning is the fact that these VAT changes, which ultimately could affect the pricing or the cost in private school education, it's not just going to affect the rich. It's going to affect working class, middle class parents who were just looking for better education for their kids. I know for one that I come from a household which was not incredibly rich, but you had parents that were working extra hard to make sure that you access a private school education. And you can only imagine if whatever that they're paying is increased by not a lot, maybe just 1,000 rand more, the ripple effect that could have on the household and them being able to affect just the basics is going to have. So I think it's very, very important, and it'll be interesting to see, because I think the bill is set to take effect in January next year. So time is definitely running out for those, organizations, stakeholders to try and object to its implementation. And we'll definitely be continuing to track this story and the response from Treasury in the weeks ahead. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. News and views. We'll be back after this.
Rejuvenating media day by day.